Good evening and welcome to our COVID-19 update. I'm Ladi Akiridoluale. Here are the highlights at this hour. Academic Staff Union of Universities chapters continue to kick against proposals to reopen tertiary institutions, cite failure to provide COVID-19 protocol facilities. 97 defaulters arrested for breaching COVID-19 social gathering protocols in Lagos. Police call them cultists. And the United States is going into a holiday weekend with fears of possible spike in cases of COVID-19 in the world's most affected country. We'll begin the bulletin tonight with the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, which is continuing to point out that caution is required by the federal government before the reopening of schools is considered, especially because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Kano and Ibadan zones of ASU held separate briefings to draw attention to this issue, as well as the non-adherence to previous agreements by the federal government.
Nigerian universities are contending with more issues in addition to closure over the pandemic. The Academic Staff Union of Universities ASU Kano Zone, which includes Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, Bayero University Kano, and Federal University Dutse, amongst others, have met over matters they consider pertinent to the livelihood of Nigerian universities.
On the 7th of February 2019, the federal government agreed to a peaceful implementation of the FGN ASU 2013 Memorandum of Understanding. As at today, government has failed to activate the recommendations of the report. Neither did it release a kobo.
As far as the resumption of schools is concerned, it's also addressed.
The fact that people are not observing those safety protocols, does that mean that we are over with COVID-19? We are not over. Does that mean that COVID-19 is not real? We have seen a number of casualties arising from this COVID-19. In fact, high-profile Nigerians have died because of COVID-19. Are we saying that it is over now and that it is safe for us to go back and open schools?
And for the Ibadan zone of ASU, the reopening of the schools could lead to an increase in the number of infections.
As the Nigerian government made the NCDC criteria on COVID-19 protocols in our institutions, must we endanger the lives of our children for pecuniary gains? Should the primary issue on life and death be used? Is profit-making more important than the health of our children?
ASU leaves an impression that a lot more needs to be done by the federal government to address the issues raised to avert a further showdown between the two parties.
In the nation's commercial capital, Lagos, the police command has arrested 97 individuals who it described as cultists for breaking the COVID-19 social gathering protocol. The suspects were arrested in a hotel in Miron, a suburb of Alimosho local government area, at about 2 a.m. while having what the police have described as a birthday party. Our correspondent, Ini John Mekwa, tells us more.
97 of them, young men and women who all appear to be under 35 age bracket, claim that the party, which started at 10 p.m., was to celebrate the 35th birthday of one of them.
It's just a mistake. I don't know that the party will be up to this.
Tell us, what is the meaning of this Maloka Bucharest that you have?
I don't know the meaning at all. I don't know the meaning.
The police, however, suspects that the gathering was an initiation by a cult group. Recovered at the venue are exhibits which include 2 sacks containing broken calabash, dead chickens, and fishes.
So it's what they have as their own uniform. So, and equally, that day too, they are to celebrate their 15 years of existence. This is what they have here now. You've seen this one now. So brothers across Nigeria, Bucharest. So Bucharest, flotilla, 15 years of their forming their own organization. So cultists. And you've seen everybody, including all the sexes, both sexes, under the guise that they want to hold a birthday cake, a birthday party. This is COVID. You cannot be more than 20 at a place, and there is curfew in the night. All the hotels now have not been asked now to do full operation. So for that order, for them to have converged till around 1:30 a.m. in the morning, that was when the initiation was still going on now. The party was going on now when we got there. I got them arrested.
The hotel manager is also in the custody of the police. He claims that all he knows is that an individual booked for 10 rooms for the 28th of August.
We told them that if they want to do it at all, they will not be more than 30, but only one person that came then to book 10 rooms for, he said maybe there will be three in the room. So just 30 of them. Okay, then we said, okay, but you can't be there for more than 2 hours or so. He said all precautions will be taken too.
The police say investigation is still on to ascertain the claim of some of the arrested persons who say they were just lodgers and not part of the party. Although the lockdown has been relaxed in Lagos State, there's still a curfew which begins at 10 p.m. and a prohibition of social gathering of persons more than 50. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, it's been 6 months since Nigeria recorded its first case of COVID-19 in Lagos State. As it is now, with the declining trend of confirmed cases of the virus in the country, activities are beginning to fall back into shape. Our next report takes a look at how patients who have recovered from the virus are moving on with their lives. Our correspondent, Titilayo Aberowo, has that.
A coronavirus disease case in Lagos.
February 28, the first confirmed case of coronavirus in Lagos set the nation into a battle with a viral disease that was later upgraded to a global pandemic and renamed COVID-19 by the World Health Organization. Government at various levels wasted no time setting up isolation and treatment centers. It appears things are getting better, as seen in the number of recoveries and discharges. Before now, high-profile figures have contracted and died from the virus, while many others have recovered. The latest of such recoveries is the Deputy Incident Commander in Lagos State, Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, who recovered from the virus in less than 2 weeks after contracting it. While news of his recovery was shared first on social media, some of those he and the team in Lagos State battled to save shared their experiences.
For me, I spent about 10 days or so in the isolation center. I usually say that 3 things were responsible, all right, for my successful recovery. First of all was courage. So, of course, you know that at the time I caught it, it was almost like a death sentence. So one had to, in so many ways, try to muster the courage to be able to try to defeat the disease. And that was largely emotional.
Your lungs tend to feel like glass. So with every deep breath you take, it's like your lungs want to shatter. And when I got to that point, I knew I had to raise the alarm. Because every breath I took in, I started coughing and my lungs were like they were going to burst or shatter.
These experiences are testimonies to the fact that COVID-19 is real. And as the government warns that the virus has not gone away, it reiterates that the home-based care pack is now available for patients who do not wish to receive treatment in isolation centers.
This is a typical home care pack that was designed. It's free of charge, and all of it has in its content some medications which are meant to be taken daily.
For some who still have doubts about the home isolation care, especially for asymptomatic patients, medical experts explain how the virus can be managed.
For example, you are 4 in a room. Wake up early in the morning, you go to work. Come back late in the evening, have your sleep. You reduce, interaction with the room.
Whether it's treatment done at the isolation centers or home care alternative, the message from the Lagos State government remains adhering to safety protocols, social distancing, and the use of sanitizers, which still remains the best way to stop the spread and keep the numbers on a downward trend. Titilayo Aberowo, Channels Television News.
The economic and social disruptions caused by the global COVID-19 pandemic not only forced countries the world over to mobilize resources to mitigate its effect on their citizens, it also saw governments enforcing laws and regulations to moderate behavior and punish irresponsible conduct. In Nigeria, the federal and state governments issued directives and regulations all in a bid to curtail the spread of the pandemic. But one thing that does not seem to be very well known is the legal framework on which those directives, whether by federal, state, or even local authorities, are based. From our understanding, that's the almost 100-year-old 1926 Quarantine Act. To take a look at this framework and the issues contained therein, we're being joined by Mr. Jiti Ogunye, a legal practitioner and a friend in the house. Welcome, Mr. Ogunye.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
1926, that's almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And somehow it escaped everybody's attention that no attention was paid to this law until this year when COVID-19 occurred.
Yes, exactly. And that's because a good law, particularly a law that regulates human conduct and activity, is supposed to exist for a long time. It's supposed to be eternal, more or less, so to speak, so that save occurrences that weren't captured in any original or initial legislation. Right. You can then have subsequent amendments and all that. A good law is not supposed to be amended at the drop of the hat every day and all that. And so when COVID-19 hit, a lot of people thought that there was no law to regulate such a calamity. And many Nigerians, including lawyers, were now calling for a brand new legislation. And on that occasion, Nigerians were advised that we have a law.
You were one of those who was advising at the time, because most people weren't aware
that we could resort to such a law. And that law was there. Yes, a lot of people said that the law was not sufficient for the current situation. That may well be so, but the law, as in all its brevity, having only 8 sections and many regulations, allows both the president at the federal level and the state governors, in consistency with the principle of federalism, the federalist principle, to exercise powers pursuant to the provisions of the law, unlike what is being intended now, which is
I'll still come to that in a little bit. Later. But I wanted to talk a little bit about those provisions you mentioned. Brief law, probably quite concise. At the time. What has happened now, everything that has happened since February up until now, has been based on that, because what is being proposed has not yet become law.
Exactly.
So everything that has happened has come under that law, this 1926 Quarantine Act.
Yes.
Have those empowered to use it, in your view, exercised the full extent of its letter?
I think so. But, the law enforcement generally and enforcement of our laws are usually challenged. Not so much because of the paucity of provisions or the inadequacy of provisions contained in any law, but because of challenges arising from the inadequacy of enforcement tools. For example, people are not supposed to gather during COVID-19 and all that. And so people were gathering. The question then was, who will be the enforcers of those provisions or regulations?
Right.
Who will go and effect arrest? Who will go and disband? Who will go and shut down premises, etc., etc.? We all saw, the anomaly that also took place, even while policemen were enforcing these interstate restrictions and lockdown and all that. So the inadequacy of enforcement cannot be the argument to say that the law is not adequate. Even when some of our laws are very elaborate, and a good law is not necessarily a verbose piece of legislation anyway, even when we have plenitude of provisions in certain laws, we're still confronted with the challenge of enforcement of this law. So my contention is that the fact that we've had these problems, for example, in Lagos, while the regulations were even being enforced and certain persons were charged to court, even those court appearances violated the regulation on social, physical distancing and
the law on which the people were being charged.
Of people, throng of people, hundreds of thousands of people were there, masked up. And so the purpose of even enforcing those regulations on those occasions were defeated. Okay? So, and the question might then be, so if you had 1,000, 2,000 persons massing up, are you going to require 3,000 policemen to ensure, in terms of numerical strength now, to ensure that there was rigid compliance with those laws? So, but we have problems with enforcement. And my view is that, yes, the 1926 law could be regarded as a nation law now, and it's necessary to look at that law and make new provisions and all that, etc. The fact that that law was there was as a result of the creativity of those we derived, our independence from. In a way, you'll be amazed at the number of laws that we have. Sometimes you may think that, there is no law regulating this conduct. But if you search deep, you'll find those provisions there, those laws there. Even outside the Quarantine Act, there are provisions in our criminal code regulating how people treat animals for human consumption, how people treat food for human consumption, and things like that, and penalizing mishandling of things to be eaten. People who have eateries and all that, they are there in those laws. As ancient as those laws were. Whereas, the criminal code, and penal code derived from the 1945 criminal code,
let me just ask you this before we take our break. Why was it then that many of even your colleagues were suggesting a brand new law as opposed to an amendment of the 1926 law to incorporate some of the provisions that they may have alleged were missing in it?
They were blindsided. But when they then discovered that the law was there, for professional ego reasons, it was difficult to walk back the statement they had made earlier about the imperative of having a brand new law. Many didn't know that such a law existed. But when their attention was then called to it, instead of then say, with all candor, say that, I didn't know that that law existed, the argument continued that, that law was inadequate, that law couldn't be resorted to, that law was too restrictive, we needed a brand new law, and without that brand new law, rights of citizens are being violated, and so on and so forth. Look, many of those things contain the regulations of the Quarantine Act are now brought into the body of the new bill being proposed as new legislation. But they aren't new because they're already in
the other legislation
as regulations, in spite of the fact that we only had 8 sections under that whole Quarantine Act.
Let's take a quick break, Mr. Oguye. When we come back, I'm going to now ask you about the new effort and why that has also in itself generated so much controversy.
Yes, exactly.
But that will be after the break. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to our COVID-19 update. Before the break, we were speaking with Mr. G.T. Oguye, a legal practitioner who's been very kind to stay on with us right after the break. Thanks for staying with us, by the way.
Yes,
let's talk now about the current effort. Fine, the 1926 Act, almost 100 years. By your position, there's nothing wrong with that law. At best, it might perhaps have required a few amendments, but we went for a brand new law. But that brand new law itself generated so much controversy and has not become law in spite of the emergency situation we found ourselves. How come?
Well, let me say that that controversy was not altogether bad. It's better that controversy is generated while a legislation is being proposed than for that controversy to come after assent is given. For example, KAMA. Right. If the controversy we're having regarding Company and Allied Matters Act 2020, if we had had that before assent, maybe something could have been done and all the shades of opinion could have been accommodated and all that. But the controversy was not altogether bad. But these controversies border on misconception. I've read the bill, and the bill is very elaborate. It has 81 sections.
As opposed to 8 in the Quarantine Act.
In the Quarantine Act, with 4 schedules and regulations all together. And those 81 sections cover 6 broad areas. The administration part, the provisions governing infectious diseases in Nigeria, the provisions governing importation or exportation of diseases into Nigeria from Nigeria, enforcement, miscellaneous provisions, etc., etc. Now, the first critique I will have about the proposed bill is that there appear to be a legislative intent to put a signature to it instead of going for an amendment. I mean, it's a legislative ego thing. I'm the one proposing this bill. I'm the one bringing forth and all that, and you have that. People have said that the proposed bill was copied from elsewhere, Singapore, or wherever. There's nothing wrong in copying a bill and domesticating it. International charters are domesticated when they didn't even originate from here. There's nothing fundamentally wrong from, for doing that. But the point is that when you look at those provisions, as elaborate as they are, there are certain provisions that will rankle. And if the bill as it is passed into law, that will generate further controversy. That might even lead to a situation in which there is litigation on that to strike out certain aspects. And I'll just quickly run through them. Yes, the bill provides for administration, as I said earlier. So instead of having shared powers and responsibilities as we have in the extant Quarantine Act, all powers that may be exercisable under the new bill, if passed into law, are now concentrated in the hands of the federal government. The Director General of the NCDC is designated as the administrator of the provisions of the Act. The Minister of Health also has powers, to make certain guidelines and all that, and make certain decisions, and the President has the power overall to declare an emergency regarding infectious diseases in certain areas and designating those areas as areas to be isolated, etc., etc. So, in a federation, therefore, while the Quarantine Act that was made in a unitary Nigeria
at
that time is sensitive to a federal Nigeria that came later by having provisions of shared powers
at various levels.
At the state level. This new one that has been proposed, interestingly, by those who are saying that they want true federalism and all that, is now concentrating all powers in the hand of the federal government. I think that that's a mistake. And I think that that should be reworked to accord with the federalist principle. Because we saw how the Lagos state government, for example, became a model in terms of how it was, giving update, managing the COVID-19 situation. So, in other words, it is possible in a federation as diverse as this, as populated as ours, for government at various levels to discharge responsibility, even if that piece of legislation is a law of general application, is a uniform law. So this proposed legislation does not have such provision, and I think that it has to be reworked so that the administration of the act, the administration of the enormous powers contained in that act can be concurrently done by the federal government and the state government both.
I'm sorry, Mr. Oguye, we've completely run out of time, unfortunately. But I guess the key point, which you've spoken to about the unitary and federal nature of what is being proposed means that many of those behind it will have to go back to the drawing board and take a look at it. But thank you so much for your time today. This is something that we will still return to because COVID-19 is not going anywhere. So the whole issue of a legal framework will still be very important. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming. There are 9 deaths that have been reported of the 10 that have been reported overnight in the Federal Capital Territory, talking about COVID-19 figures, according to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the NCDC. One of those deaths was in Delta State. The demographics of the confirmed cases have remained largely unchanged, with more being male than female. 64 to 36% is the exact figure. The country recorded 239 COVID-19 cases last night in 14 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Community transmission is still ongoing, with 75% not knowing where they got the virus from. The number of active cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria stands at 11,214 after 372 people were discharged from 10 states and the FCT. Plateau State discharged the highest, 109, followed by Benue at 75, Bauchi at 52, Kano 44, Kaduna 27, the FCT 17, Rivers 14, Imo 12, Edo 11, Ogun 8, and Osun 3. Apart from those discharged in Kaduna State, more updates from the government's Twitter account show that only 11 samples tested positive of 96 analyzed, and the new cases are 5 each from Kaduna North and Kaduna South, and 1 from Chicken local government area. Let's talk now to Dr. Felix Oyari, consultant community physician, University of Abuja Teaching Hospital. Dr. Oyari, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take a look at some of these figures. Are interesting, shall we say. But it does appear as if, going by everything that is happening now, we are on a downward trend in terms of cases. Or again, is this with the caveat about testing?
Well, from the picture, looks like it is coming down, though it cannot be said with some definite tone or so, but I think that whatever it is, for whatever reason, it's coming down as if it's flattening. Because 140 something, 250 something is not what we had before.
Let's look at it from this other angle then. So many of your colleagues, people we have spoken to about this whole issue of flattening the curve and what is happening, have mentioned the point about testing. We're still testing in fairly low numbers. After 6 months, all the tests that we have conducted are still less than 500,000, and we're talking about a population of also almost 200 million Nigerians. And we now have community spread. So how are we going to ensure that we know what our real case burden is at this point?
Yes, going back to the drawing board, because we need to go to the communities, to populations, and do testing. We need to do testing. Even though some people are reluctant to come out for testing because of some misgivings, as the lawyer was saying, misrepresentations, misinformation. So much information is going out there, not censored, not monitored by all kinds of people. It is a big distraction for the population, for people. As we said earlier, before now, people do not believe many people don't believe what we're preaching. They have their reasons, may not be correct, but based on their level of knowledge, which means the most important thing is community education, population education. And it comes down to how is our manpower for this work? I'm talking of community health workforce. I'm talking of the community physicians, the community health workers, and all that. Those who are somehow skilled and trained in community enlightenment, in population awareness creation, so that people can see the reason to test. As we were saying before, there are so many things that make people not to even come out, even they are sick. That if they come out, they will be labeled COVID without even seeing any test, without seeing the result of the test that was done. So there's a lot of denial, a lot of withdrawal. People are coming, but not the way we expect it. And of course, testing facilities is not what you just do like malaria parasite and so on. You have to have the people, trained manpower who will do the testing. You have to have the facilities where the testing will be done. Imagine the population of Nigeria, imagine the vast land. How can we have testing centers at every part of Nigeria? And centers that the people have been educated, empowered, informed of the necessity to do tests.
You are in Abuja, Dr. Oyari, you are in Abuja. My apologies for butting in, yes. But you are in Abuja there, and the statistics show that if Abuja doesn't have the highest number of people receiving or active cases, that is those receiving treatment, it'll be one of the top 3 at the moment. What do you ascribe that to? Why Abuja in particular, especially because Abuja is one of the places where this information is supposed to be widespread. A lot of people there are highly educated and are, of course, in the middle of everything that is happening.
Well, the information on radios and so on, they are good. But the most important form of information is community engagement. In some communities, you go and beat town crier, will pass information. That one doesn't go down well. It's true that information is everywhere in Abuja. But people need to engage stakeholders. For instance, we have Council of Elders in some places. We have the Ward Development Committee members in every ward. It's supposed to be. And any information you give to these people where they are working, that information gets to the people. That is the kind of thing we need. Go down to the grassroots. Engage the stakeholders. Engage the professionals that's in the community. But of course, you know that many of the professionals we are talking about may not want to go and stay in the communities. And they have their own many reasons. But from our experience, when people are properly educated, when issues are explained and they get it correct, whatever you want them to do, they do.
That would be a good point. That would be a good point for us to leave it, Dr.
Oyari.
Dr. Felix Oyari, consultant community physician, University of Abuja Teaching Hospital. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time, and do continue to stay safe out there.
Thank you.
The officials of Buji local government in Jigawa State, where residents recently witnessed devastating floods, say they will not relent in the fight against COVID-19 in spite of the situation. The head of Department of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, Musa Gambo, discussed this to Channels Television at the local government secretariat. According to him, the people are more at risk at a time like this, so there is the need for everyone to buckle up.
When there is flooding, the whole community become susceptible to even common microorganisms, not talk of COVID-19. Because when there is flooding, there is the risk of gastroenteritis, there is the risk of cholera, there is the risk of outbreak of malaria, and all hosts of other things. So when there is flooding, the community is really at risk, much more than when there is absence of flooding. While the flooding is a problem on itself, war against COVID-19 is another problem on its own. In fact, we could even say it is more dangerous to lose the war against COVID-19, you understand, than to have problem with flooding. So that is why, while the local government is at the same time trying to curb the menace of the flooding, it is also not losing its sight on war against COVID-19. That was what happened. That is what the local government is really concerned about.
In Yobe State, the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management has handed over 69 trucks of palliatives to the state government to cushion the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Making the presentation on behalf of the ministry was the Northeast Zonal Coordinator of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, Ishaya Isa, who says the palliatives are meant to assist over 41,000 vulnerable households across the state.
We are here to present to you assorted grains from the National Food Reserve, approved by the President and the Commandant-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, as palliative for distribution to vulnerable persons affected by the recent restriction of movement to curtail the spread of COVID-19 pandemic.
The United States is approaching a holiday weekend, and many are concerned that the COVID-19 cases could escalate because of increased social gatherings. This comes as the U.S. government says it will not participate in a global initiative to develop, manufacture, and equitably distribute a vaccine for COVID-19 because the effort is co-led by the World Health Organization, the WHO. The WHO announced last month that more than 170 countries were in talks to participate in COVID-19 vaccines global access facility, also known as COVAX. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, has more on how COVID-19 continues to impact employment and the U.S. economy.
The United States has hit record numbers of COVID-19 cases, just tipping over 6 million.
The continued growth in the spread of COVID-19 has put the economy in turmoil as the White House and Congress try to agree upon an aid package. White House Chief of Staff voices his opinion.
$1.3 trillion of aid that goes largely to agreed upon and shared goals of helping people that are hurting the most. 1.3, which is more than the aid that we sent during the 2008 meltdown. $1.3 trillion of aid she said no to. She would rather have zero and keep it at 2.2.
While the White House and Congress battle over the second stimulus bill, Americans continue to suffer with underemployment and unemployment.
I would love to go back to work and do the best I can
and get on with my life. We all listen to stay home and do everything we can in order for us not to spread the virus. But it means to me devastation.
While many struggle during this time, young entrepreneurs are finding ways to use their creativity and talents to create business opportunities.
The journey of starting a business during the pandemic has been exciting in a way because a lot of people are buying your supplies or buying your products, and it seems like you have the attention of any customer, especially your target audience. So it has been an adventure. It has been an exciting time to actually start entrepreneurship for myself. So that's a little bit about me starting a business during the pandemic.
As the U.S. is still battling COVID-19, it is speculated that by September the 19th, cases will reach a death toll of 200,000. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channels Television News.
All right, let's talk to Maria Bird now. She joins us live from Washington, D.C. Good evening, Maria. Thank you for your time this evening, and trust that you're keeping safe.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm keeping safe.
There is worry for the coming weekend. The U.S. already is the most affected country in the world. Your report there emphasizing that 6 million, and by the 19th, they expect to have 200,000 dead. Yet, this weekend, the numbers are expected to spike in the aftermath.
Yes, you're exactly correct. Unfortunately, we saw a huge spike at Memorial Day, which was the beginning of the summer season here in the U.S. And so they're expecting, as the summer season comes to a close, people will do the same thing. They'll hit the beaches, they'll have family gatherings, they'll have other social events, and they will begin to potentially spread the virus, especially the younger population, which has been a very hard hit to try to get them to understand really the issues surrounding and the potential risk of being in close proximity. We also have many colleges that are beginning to reopen. So many college students will be beginning to have social gatherings during this weekend, which we know that colleges have even had to close down and move to virtual online education because of hot spots and hot pockets of the coronavirus spreading.
We can not talk about the economy, can't we? The fact of the matter is that even though it presents a lot of challenges, your report also emphasizes that it presents a lot of opportunities. But in terms of the figures, is it showing any signs of improvement now, even as we head towards the elections in November?
We're seeing record numbers of unemployment rates across the country, but that is really, we're seeing the numbers of those who are applying for unemployment benefits increasing each and every day. We have, one of the largest corporations in the country, MGM, is laying off close to 800,000 individuals. And so we see many of these large scale, especially those in the hospitality industry, that are having to lay off individuals and employees because they just don't have the numbers of individuals coming to some of their facilities, resorts, and hotels. Just here in the District of Columbia in Washington, they're seeing only 3% of occupancy in many hotels in downtown Washington, which is very rare, where you're looking at 90% plus this time of year of hotel occupancy rates. So we're in some times that I think for traditional business owners, they're struggling right now, but some new entrepreneurs are finding creative ways to take the pandemic, and those who potentially have been laid off from their traditional jobs are finding ways to create work for themselves and to become their own small business owner.
Indeed, they are, and we can only wish them the best. Maria, we'll talk again real soon. Thank you for your time this evening, and do continue to stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has tested positive for COVID-19. The 83-year-old is currently in isolation at his home near Milan and will continue to work from there. He is the latest high-profile individual to be infected with the disease as the race to develop a vaccine continues. Speaking of which, the Trump administration says the United States does not want to be constrained, in its own words, by multilateral organizations influenced by the corrupt World Health Organization and China. That's referring to the WHO-backed coalition of 172 countries to share equitably any future vaccines against COVID-19.
President Donald Trump's insistence on not joining the WHO initiative comes as the country passed the 6 million mark on the number of coronavirus cases, with experts criticizing the government for its weak response to the pandemic, which has claimed nearly 185,000 citizens.
Compare the United States with China. When we have 50,000 people a day infected, which we have 45 to 50,000 every day over the last month, they have 10 to 15 people infected. When we have 1,200 people die a day, they have none die a day.
In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's leadership during the pandemic has also been criticised, especially from the opposition Labour Party.
Even his own MPs have run out of patience. The Vice Chair of the 22 Committee, the MP for Broxbourne, has said the government says one thing on Monday, changes its mind on Tuesday, something different is presented on Wednesday. That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
South Korea is seeing a surge in the number of patients critically ill with COVID-19, most of them aged over 60. As at midnight today, 124 patients were in serious or critical condition with COVID-19. There was a rise of 20 cases from the previous day and a marked increase from the 9 cases on August the 18th. And in Italy, Pope Francis held his first weekly general audience with a live crowd in 6 months as the Holy See slowly lifts restrictions imposed due to the coronavirus pandemic. About 500 people attended the event held in the San Damaso courtyard in the Vatican's Apostolic Palace, nearly all of them wearing masks and keeping social distancing except for when the Pope walked near them. Finally, in China, head of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Gao Fu, says there is no evidence that the mutation of the novel coronavirus will affect the COVID-19 vaccines under development. He also noted that since the winter flu season is coming, the situation will become complicated because the flu may mix with the COVID-19 to threaten people's health. He suggests people receive flu vaccination first before a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine with good quality control becomes available.
That's our COVID-19 update for tonight. Thanks for watching. Of course, you can get details of our stories tonight and a whole lot more by visiting our website, channelstv.com. I'm Ladia Keridoluale. Good night.